Yar, mates. Welcome back to the Canon Pirates. I'm your host, Pirate, with my co-host, Noah and Sam. And today we have a very special guest of the British Man.
Hello.
Yar. Today we're discussing two very interesting books, Grapes of Wrath and The Sound and the Fury. Yar. So what is your book about, Noah?
The Sound and the Fury is about a well-off family through making bad decisions and being kind of pretentious and bad people all around, falling into disarray, and their strong, competent, diligent servant Dilsey gaining everything the Compsons ever wanted.
Yar! And what about you, Sam? Well, Pirater, The Grapes of Wrath is a book about a family during the Great Depression in the Dust Bowl losing their house to the bank after going into debt because of all the crops that are just completely destroyed from the Dust Bowl, and making the hard decision to go and move to California and search for work. However, they were never actually able to find that work, truly. They were only able to get very low pay and very bad working conditions, which ended up killing off some of them and leaving the rest in miserable conditions that they can now recover from. Let's start boarding that ship that is this question. What is the origin for your summer reading book? Let's start with you, Noah.
Sound and the Fury was made by William Faulkner in 1929, right before the Great Depression.
So my book, The Grapes of Wrath, was written by John Steinbeck, which was written in 1939, which is at the later stage of the Great Depression, and obviously part of the Dust Bowl as well. So I really wanted to start with this, though. How's the themes in your book? What are the themes in your book? Are they good? Are they bad? What do you think?
So the main theme of the book is that if you are self-serving and only think about yourself, as the Miss Compsons is always just thinking about herself and being self-pitying and always just not really thinking about other people's problems, and always saying, well, if I'll be gone soon, so it won't be as much of an issue. Mm-hmm. And a lot of other characters' deaths are caused by same sort of not caring about what their family wants, and more saying, if you don't do this right, I'll whip you. And you have to follow exactly what I say.
See, and The Grapes of Wrath is actually kind of different than that, because instead of having this not caring thing to it, the families traveling to California deeply care for each other, and they don't care who you are. I know when the Joad family was on their trip over, multiple times they would help families out. They helped start the car of one family, and they helped travel with them for a little bit. They did so much, even though they had almost nothing to give themselves.
I think that's a good point.
And then also a main theme of The Grapes of Wrath is just the utter hopelessness that's surrounding the characters. At the beginning of the book, they lost their house. They lost basically everything they ever owned, and decided to make the trip to go to California. And then during the trip, they lost their grandparents. They both died. They lost a few family members because they decided to leave the travel thing. They decided to just leave their family because they thought that it wasn't worth it to go to California. And then once they did get to California and realized the utter truth that the work there was not as prosperous as it was shown in the letters that were sent out, the theme of hopelessness just truly shines through.
I think that's a good point.
Because through California, it's shown that the people who don't put in the work, the people who own the farms and all that in California, they're not doing any of the work. They're just hiring people for very low wages because they know they have to take it or else they'll starve. All right, Pirater, what's the next prompt? Yar, matey. Has your book gone on to have a lasting influence on other books? Is it frequently alluded to or referenced?
Yes, The Sound and the Fury was very influential, and it went on to make two movies that were based on the work, and is a widely shared and publicized story where many people refer back to it. There's a lot of analyses. I couldn't find many works that referred to The Sound and the Fury, but there were a lot of articles and people who talked about The Sound and the Fury and its meaning and how it relates to today. And The Grapes of Wrath was very influential, and people refer back to it all the time when talking about the Dust Bowl, which I wouldn't know much about, so I'm gonna send this topic of U.S. history to, what's your name? Sam.
Yeah, so like basically in the Dust Bowl, like it's because of a lot of like farmers back in the old days, they didn't really do any like crop rotations. They never made sure that the soil was like actually like had enough nutrients in it, so they would just keep planting the same crop over and over and never actually replenishing the nutrients like we do today. So when they did that for long enough, the soil became like so like unneutralized, I guess is the word for it, that it basically just flew away like dust, which is why it's named the Dust Bowl. And because it was so widespread, it destroyed so many crops during that time. It ruined millions of families living in the Midwest area during the 1920s, 1930s. And evidently it caused like a mass migration to California and more western areas to search for work and hopefully find a new future for their family.
Yeah, I like that. And it is my belief that The Sound and the Fury did start right as the Great Depression hit America. So, can you give us a little bit of insight on that, Noah? So, the Great Depression, while the author, I don't believe, knew that they were about to go into the Great Depression, the fact that the Great Depression was about to occur at the time that the author wrote this book still shows signs in the way that the family started losing a lot of their financial wealth.
Yeah. You know, it's very similar with the Grapes of Wrath as well, because like although the author did know about the Great Depression at that point, because it was much later into it in the 1930s, it still has that like similar like area of like families losing wealth and such.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, but let's go to a little bit more of a modern perspective. I think that my book, The Sound and the Fury, has a very relevant message to today's people, not just those back in the 1920s, because the book's really about not being like a terrible person. And I think that message is always relevant, no matter what time period, no matter what day and age. So, yeah.
I think my book strays just a little bit from that. It's more so like centered on like caring for your own family, like caring for others, because we see time and time again in the Grapes of Wrath where they're basically traveling together and they're caring for each other. They're making sure everyone has what they need, even though the money isn't really there. They're trying to make sure that everyone's needs are made. Like they're just trying to survive together as a family, and even they'll help other families that they see along the road. It's quite nice.
Yeah, well, I don't see as much of the helping other families aspect in The Sound and the Fury. A large aspect of the being a good person is caring for your family and not being totally self-serving, like the mother who is always like, I'm gonna die soon, and self-pitying, and doesn't actually like respond to the issues that the family's having. And every time an issue pops up, she's like, oh, I'm gonna die soon, so you guys don't have to worry about me, and always making it about herself and not really respecting people.
I kind of want to just like go away from that question and go into something else. Like, do you have any issues like specifically with your book that may like impact its like relevance as part of the canon currently?
So the book has the first two chapters of the book are really, really difficult reads, because the first chapter of the book is through the perspective of Benji, who is intellectually disabled and he always talks about things in a really weird way, and everything kind of meshes together, and it doesn't really make sense until you go back and try to like figure out everything. And then the second chapter is not as difficult, but it's very like poetic. It's not very like direct with what it's saying, and there's a lot of like inflated stuff in that section. It's like the time, and it's like talking about how the clock is like shattering, like all this like symbolic meaning, and very difficult to understand. But after that, it's a lot better. So that's probably my biggest issue with making this part of the canon.
Okay. Because I mainly wanted to ask that because I feel like the Grapes of Wrath doesn't really have any issues that would like impact its status as part of the canon, because it really is just like a deep down story about a family trying to survive the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression. Like, there's nothing really very controversial about it. It's like in any sense. There's not a lot of racism. There's not a lot of like anything that would like actually like impact its status. And really, that's why I think it should have a seat at the table. It should be part of the canon. Like, it already is part of the canon, and it should stay there. Like, it's just a very good book for kids to read nowadays. Like, it's just a very good message of, like, caring for your family, and it would be very impactful to everyone who read it, including myself.
And I believe that The Sound and the Fury is much less relevant to today's society than back in 1929, because back then a lot of the issues affecting the family were applicable to many households, but in a more modern sense, a lot of the same issues and character flaws don't really apply to the people who live in modern society. So I'm thinking that this book should really be replaced by a book that's more relevant to the modern people and more relevant to the family dynamic of the modern day.
Yeah. Yar, me mateys. That be all the time we have today.